Hey, if you're just joining us today, my special guest is Tom Colclasure. And please remember to click, like, and share, because the more we get the word out about these episodes of Thinking with Mike, where I interview interesting people talking about interesting things, the more that we can get the message out. And today's message is interesting because, I decided, I talked to our team. I said, I want to interview my next door neighbor. Like, why do you want to interview your next door neighbor? I said, well, because he's interesting as hell, which is a coincidence. I have a show about that. And the thing about me and Tom is, and Tom moved in about 15 years ago, and him and I have not always agreed on politics and social issues. But as I thought about this, I was wondering, how true is that really? Because, I don't think we live in a binary universe, but it seems like the media wants to cast everyone in a binary terms, right? And there's the least binary guy I know is Tom Colclasure, and you'll see that soon. So, Tom, welcome.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you're literally sitting in the house next door to mine, which is really cool.
Yes, we're probably about 50, 75 yards apart. Yeah,
I'm in the factory right down the street.
Oh, okay.
All on Prairie Street at Galesburg, Illinois. And are you you're a native from here, aren't you?
I was born here and raised most of my life here. I moved away a couple times, and my family moved away for a while, but we keep coming back to the Berg.
You do. And you are a traveled person. We're going to talk about you going to India and things like that, and your experiences with issues that are international, which are fascinating. But why don't you just give a brief summary of what you think you want the customers, I just said, the people watching the show, what do you want them to know about you?
About me? I feel like I'm just another ordinary guy living in Galesburg, doing the best I can with the tools I have and the life that I've made. And it's important to me to service has always been very important to me, whether it's through vocational service, volunteer service, just trying to make the world a little bit better place if I can, and do my best at least.
Yeah, I love that about you. And the apple doesn't always fall far from the tree. I mean, your dad's got your name. You've got your dad's name. And
exactly, but he did that to himself.
That's his doing. And he worked. I don't know if he still does. Is he retired now?
He's retired. Yeah, he retired from Shelby County Services Commission down in Shelbyville, Illinois, a few years ago, and moved back. And so yeah, he spent many years doing the financial side of mental health, and I did many years doing the service side of mental health.
Yeah, tell us what that was, because you basically helped people, the mentally ill, kind of get their lives together, if you could.
Sure. So community mental health is based on trying to provide resources for people in the community who might not otherwise have those, and that would include things like housing, medication, psychosocial, traumatic mental health experiences. And yeah, those are the main things that we did. Case management, which is having case managers work with people to help them maintain their services. So
you got cut off a little bit, but you're talking about how you work with the mentally ill. And what was that like? Was that a frustrating experience? Because Galesburg is kind of famous because during the Reagan era, when we started cutting back on mental ill, housing people with mental illness, and we kind of let them go back into the population, Galesburg was kind of flooded with situations and issues. Did you have to experience that? Were you like in the front line of that, the aftermath of that?
Well, not then. I was too young. In the mid '80s, I was still in high school. I didn't graduate till '86, but we did see fallout from that for years to come. And so yeah. Now even during my career, state hospitals closing outside of Galesburg and other locations as well was a huge deal. And a lot of times, because we do have strong community mental health, people would be, I hate to say it, but dumped in our community. And we would provide assistance as best we could. So the funding for mental health is always an issue. The Medicaid fee for service aspect of that is frustrating for providers. You spend more time doing paperwork than you do interventions, and nobody goes into mental health because they want to do paperwork. They go into mental health because they want to help people. And the Medicaid system is set up in a way that it has very strict rules, and it often looks for ways to recoup funds by looking for ticky-tack errors and that sort of thing. And so it's frustrating for people like me who want to get in there, get our hands dirty, help people out. when you have the bean counters telling us exactly what we're supposed to do, and they're not professionals always in that case. But that's a different story, and
Yeah.
I don't want to spend time complaining about state government.
No.
We'd spend the whole hour doing that then.
Yeah, and we see an uptick now, and I know this is out of your control, but we do see an uptick now in homelessness in America. We're getting some of it right near on Prairie Street here, where people are like kind of in caravans, and there's garbage piling up, and I wonder how much of that is mental health, and it must be an issue if people need medication, and you're basically relying on them to self-medicate. Is that an issue?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are seeing an uptick in homelessness, and a lot of it is tied to mental health issues as well as substance abuse issues. Mike, you know as well as I do, even in this area here, we have squatters in houses that are abandoned, and there have been problems both, from the side of the person who is squatting and from the side of people who own these buildings not taking care of these buildings. We had an instance where we had a guy living actually next door, not you, the other way.
Yeah, I saw the guy.
Yeah, he lived there for a long time, but with no electricity, no heat, no running water. It would be sub-zero weather in the winter, and he would get by sleeping in a mummy bag in the basement of that building, and severe mental health issues. But he non-compliance with mental health is a problem too, and that's a lot of people are. They don't want to admit they have a mental health issue.
Right.
They will. Sometimes it's easier to live in the world, the unmedicated world, than it is to live in the medicated world, where they have to face some of the things that they've gone through and done. It's a very sad, tragic thing for everybody involved: the person with the illness, the families who care for them and love them, the community who wants the best for them but doesn't know how to provide that. It's a fine line, and I, having spent years in social services, I appreciate social services. I think that sometimes people don't like the cost of social services because they are expensive. I don't think they realize the cost of not having social services.
Right.
How much worse things would be for individuals, their families, and the community at large if we didn't have resources for people to utilize for their wellness.
Well, it's becoming a theme in my show because I interview people all over the country, and a couple of people in California I've interviewed said it's just so bad here. I mean, I go out to this, if I go to a store, in front of the store, they're squatting. There's defecation going on, and just these people just and they feel bad because they know a lot of them have, besides the drugs, they have mental health issues or both, right? And it's tough. And I just and I hate, I'm not a snitch, but I do call the public safety building when I see, for instance, that right down the street from us, that old bank drive-through. There's some cars parked there. I know they're squatting there. There's a big pile of garbage, which is like rat food ready to go, right? And I see people defecating in public. And I call and say, listen, there's something going on over there. You got to check it out because there's kids walking by. This is a family neighborhood, and I don't want to be a jerk, but Jesus, I mean, this is not Haiti. We got to do something about this because it's our neighborhood. So you feel like you're torn because you feel, in one sense, you feel like a liberal, like you want to help people and you want the world, you want to be kind to your neighbors, and that includes everybody. But at the same time, you want to protect your neighborhood too, right? So it's like a tension. What are you going to do?
No, it's a good question, and we've been struggling with those questions for as long as there's been people living together. Mm-hmm. If you look back at some of the older methods of dealing with mental illness, they were quite barbaric, and we've moved away from that. We're trying to consider people's rights are important. Also, the health and safety of the neighborhood or the community is also important. It's a fine line, and nobody really has a good answer. Or the perfect answer, I should say. There's lots of answers out there. Yeah. Some of them are really good. Some of them are not quite as good. Some of them are, considerate of all the players involved. Some of them are merely financial. So we can't come to a consensus on the best way to deal with this. A lot of times we're doing it piecemeal, and it's tough work. You can get burned out on it pretty easily. I did it for over 20 years, and there were times where, being on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it takes a toll. And so I was ready to step away when I did.
Yeah.
But I applaud the people that are doing it. a lot of young people coming into the field. Got to have young people because they have the energy and they have the desire to be good citizens or good neighbors. And so I never discourage anybody. I work with college students, like you said. I work with some that want to go into counseling or psychology and so forth. And I never discourage them, but I'm always very honest with them about what the demands are. And you really can't take your work home with you. You want to help people. You want to save everybody if you can. You can't take it home with you, or you will be consumed.
Right. And I
also tell them, yeah.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
And I would tell them also, don't expect to make a living wage off it either. It's just not that kind of field.
Social work in general, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say, just so you know, you probably hear this yourself, but we have a lot of Knox students work for our business, and a lot of them work for you. And they say nothing but glowing things about you. They're like, oh, I know Tom, he's awesome, because they work at the library. Now, are you running the library now? Are you function in the library? What do you do at the library?
Yeah. I manage the circulation desk,
mm-hmm.
which means I have like usually 20, between 20 and 30 students working mm-hmm. For me. And I schedule them and train them on how we run things there. And I love hiring first year students because I get to watch them grow for the next 4 years. And it's always amazing to see them develop as human beings into knowing who they are, at least better than they did when they came. And I find that very rewarding. One thing I find is that a lot of times our students, they're so eager. My son's a sophomore at Cornell, and you've got your son is in college now. One of your sons is in college now. They're so eager to get out there into the world. And at the same time, there's almost like an emptiness of not knowing who they are, or feeling like they've been left behind in some way because they're not out there doing it. And some students, I'll tell them, I'm like, you're in a great position because you've got so many people that you're going to meet that are going to be so important to you in your life and who you become that you have no idea even exist because you're so young and there's so much experience ahead of you. The person maybe that you're going to marry, the person that's going to help you develop in your career, really important people. You haven't even met them yet. You have so much to look forward to. And I don't think they come into school thinking that way.
Right.
And I think that even at our age, Mike, we're not old guys, but we're not young guys anymore either. Mm-hmm. There's still people out there that are going to be very important in our lives, whether it's business-wise or spiritually or in some other capacity that we have no idea even exist yet. And I find that exciting. And I think everybody at every age can have that as something to look forward to. Yeah, and as an incentive to get yourself out there.
Yeah, it's like a truth of the universe. Like that you're connecting to all these things that the knowables, and there's the unknowable people you don't know about yet, you can't know, and they're going to kind of define you, your future self, right? You're talking about you're giving these kids hope in their future self, right? So you're saying make the investment now, start learning. And we talked about this at Heather and I went to a couple of Knox functions this week, and Knox grads have one thing in common. They all agree on, and that is, and we don't agree on a lot, but we agree on this. Knox networks are very strong. Knox people, Knox college people, alums help each other big time. It's like an important part of the whole culture is it never stops. Right. And it's, so you could tell them that too, like, rely on don't be afraid to ask the alums for help. Because almost always, even if they can't help you directly, they're gonna set you up with someone who can. They're guaranteed. So you could tell them that, like, you got lifelines, you got lots of lifelines. So yeah, absolutely.
The alums get satisfaction out of being able to help people that were, that remind them of themselves when they were young, and that makes total sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I look at my 21, 22-year-old self and I think, what a loser. I was such an idiot, but I was wide-eyed. I was one of those go-getter types too. And I really thought I owned the place, and I just, burned it up. I was loving Knox. Gives kids a lot of experiences, but it gives them a lot of latitude. You could do a lot at Knox, especially if you don't ask for permission. You can just do a lot of stuff.
That's
don't.
Yeah, you're right.
Don't. If you ask for permission, they're going to say no, but they don't want to say no. It's a funny thing about that. So, I see you now. I think men have different phases of their lives. Obviously, when you're a Knox college student, you're not a mentor. You're probably not. That's not part of the stage of your life where you should be mentoring kids. Because you're still a kid. But I see you now in the mentoring stage, and I see you also. You also are getting your master's degree in divinity. So what's that all about?
Well, I already have one master's degree that I don't use in history, and I thought, why not get another one that I may or may not use? Um, I've always had a religious or a spiritual side to myself. And when I first went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to study. I knew I liked history. I knew I was interested in world religion. And I just couldn't see myself in a church setting at that time, 21, 22 years old, or 18, 19. And so I decided I couldn't go that route. But it's always been important to me. And my religious experiences in churches and elsewhere have been both extremely uplifting and positive, and also extremely frustrating and anger inducing even at times. And I think that I'm not alone in that. I think most people experience highs and lows with their church life. Churches are human institutions, and we do the best we can to, it's centered around a form of worship and understanding of a greater reality than we usually approach in our daily lives. They're still human institutions, flawed by human impulses and egos and so forth. So for a while, I thought, I don't want that. And I've kind of realized, well, everything you do is going to have those elements, those human elements in it. And so why not participate? Just do the best you can to try to navigate those in a positive way for yourself and for the people you're interacting in. And once again, I've met some really important people that I wouldn't have met otherwise without being involved in religious institutions. And it's kind of my years of social work. One of the things that frustrated me was they talked about spirituality as being something that people can rely on, but it was very generic. And that's okay. You're giving people an idea of what's out there and so forth, but there's no real spiritual development that's part of the mental health healing process. And I think maybe there could be or should be for those who want that. Some people want that, other people don't. That's fine too. But I just felt drawn. I felt like I was doing spiritual work in a setting that wasn't spiritual. And I feel that if in a church setting or in a spiritual setting, I could continue to do the basic kind of work I was doing, but focused on the spiritual.
Right.
So that's what drew me back into grad school at age, I think I was 49 when I went back to grad school. Been doing it for 5 years now, part-time while I'm working. Yeah. So that's the impetus for that.
Yeah. What do you think about the idea? I mean, I could tackle this subject now 20 different ways, but I'm going to tackle it this way. What do you think about the idea of surrender, but like in a positive sense? Because when I think of Christianity, I think of a kind of a surrender, but Islam too, I think of a kind of a surrender. But Christian surrender, I think, is a little different. What do you think about the idea of surrender? What do you think I mean by it?
Well, I can't know exactly what you mean by it, but I can give it a shot, I guess. I think for me, the surrender would be sometimes we harden our hearts against people or institutions or things or whatever it is. And to me, it's life difficult. And to me, when I surrender, that means I'm not hardening my heart towards any particular person or identity or group. I open my heart to them. And in that way, I feel like when I'm opening myself up like that, I'm surrendering to God, and I'm surrendering to God's love and what God wants of us in our interactions with each other. You nailed it earlier when you talked about how our society right now, everything is so polarized. It seems to be the goal of institutions, media, whatever, to polarize people and to actually try to get us to hate each other because we don't agree on certain things. And I can't think of a less Christian way to approach life or to approach each other than trying to literally demonize each other. And so therefore, I really want to do just the opposite. I don't want to call people out on things. I want to call people in. And basically what I want to say is open your heart open your heart and approach your interactions and your relationships in that way. And you know what? That's really hard to do. That's a difficult task.
Right. But it is an act of letting go. But it's an
Absolutely.
article, but it's an article of faith, because you have the faith that God is real, the universe works. You don't have to be always on fighting this fight and having your heart hard. And that's a biblical term, isn't it? I mean, that was God's admonishment to the tribe, was they've hardened their hearts. They can't be led because they're just, and Moses was like, I can't do it because their hearts are hard, right? I mean, that's a kind of a phrase you hear a lot in the Old Testament, isn't it?
Yeah, that is one of the themes. And I think that's the message. Part of the message of Jesus, his message of love, has to do with opening your hearts. That's what love is, right? Opening your heart and allowing yourself, putting yourself out there and taking a risk.
Yeah.
You don't have love without taking a risk, whether it's romantic love or whether it's love of even your children. I mean, there are people that I know that have very difficult relations with their children, and part of it is because they're angry with their children, and children are angry with their parents. Mm-hmm. Those things are going to happen. But if we continue, if we harden our hearts to make sure that our way is seen as the way, we're going to close those doors. And if we open those doors, then we have a better chance of having the relationships we want, I think.
Yeah, there seems to be a kind of wanting to be right seems to trump wanting to be in another state. It's like, I'm not saying this very well, but this wanting to be right on things, right, is a way of covering up vulnerability, right? And saying to somebody, I'm open to the idea that you might be right here and I might be wrong, is another way of surrendering. It's not, the sky's not going to fall. Your head's not going to fall. If you're not going to die, by saying, I'm open to the idea that I might be conservative, you might be liberal, but you might be right on this issue. And I'm open to that. To me, that diffuses something that ought to be diffused. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I heard someone, I can't tell you who it was recently, we've lost the art of not having an opinion on everything.
Yeah.
We don't have to have an opinion on every little thing,
right.
Especially very strong opinions about things that we probably don't know very much about. Right. Here's an example, if you don't mind. I served a term on the school board, and there was a strike while I was on the school board, and my wife's a teacher and I was on the board. So, we did fine during that. I'd never felt that it was an us against them from my point of view, even though many people it was us against them. But one thing I learned was, even at the smallest, I don't want to say it's the smallest, but at local government level, the people making decisions don't always have all the information. When the strike was over and I could communicate freely with some of the union leaders, some of the things that I had been told were not correct. And not that I take everything, both sides are pushing their, trying to get the job done the way they want it done. I just realized that even at this level where people know each other, not all the information is always out there. So then I look at our federal level, our state level, where people are voting on very consequential things. They don't have all the information that they should have before they're making their votes. It really shook my faith in government. I mean, right. Government's important. We have to have it. But as far as like the competencies of what people know when they're making these decisions, I really have my doubts.
And they feel compelled. They have like 2 years or 4 years to make a decision, right? Or otherwise they got to run again and say, I'd never made a decision. And they can't say, well, I didn't have the right information, so I sat on my hands. They feel compelled to make decisions, even if they're not. I got another thing that's going to blow you away. Stephen Wolfram and Conrad Wolfram over at the Wolfram Institute, they have the biggest AI machine in the world, Wolfram Alpha. It rivals Google, right? And that's what they study is, intelligence, right? And they said, here's a problem. Stephen Wolfram had his theory called there's a kind of irreducibility and reducibility. Like we think about reducibility, like you could find the data sets, right? And find solutions and theories and formulas, and airplanes will fly and buildings won't fall over in a windstorm and things, the shit works, right? That's science applied, right? But most of the universe has data sets that are irreducible, meaning that there is no pattern, there is no solution. and it's actually more often than not, we only live in little pools of reducibility. So we pocket ourselves so we can build houses that, don't blow over in windstorms, and cars that go, and rockets that fly. But there's a lot more stuff we don't even consider doing because we couldn't do the science around it because there's too much data. Climate science might be one of those things where it's just so much data, and actually there might not be a formula that says just put in X1 here and you get out perfect climate here. Like, it might not even exist. And that's what they're suggesting, is some things aren't fixable.
Yeah,
which is spooky.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, that science works for everything. Like, actually science does. The history of math is most people never used math in history. We like to think that math was used for everything. No, it was hardly ever used. We built cathedrals without math. We drew a few drawings and said, yeah, make the arch go that way and tilted it. But Conrad Wolfram or Stephen Wolfram was telling me, Conrad saying, we hardly ever used math, and he's a mathematician. So we have these, we hold, and you probably have seen this too, where sometimes when people leave one religion, they might bolster up something else, and it might be science, as another religion, another answer all kind of thing. And it's another temple, and it has its problems too. Well, that's all I wanted to say about that. I think it's kind of interesting.
Well, that goes back to the ego, the human ego. We think we can do anything, and there's lots we can do. We've done amazing things as a species, not all of them good. And so, for us to think that we can fix everything is not feasible. But at the same time, got to try, right? We got to do what we can within the sphere of influence that we have to influence and make changes, I would say.
Right. Hey, how did you did this thing with your son? Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you do reenactment, Civil War reenactment?
Yeah, when he was in junior high, maybe like freshman year, we did a couple reenactments.
Yeah. Now,
and it was a blast. Like I said, I'm a history nerd, and
I know you are. So that's why I ask you that. How did that? Because some of these guys are like method actors, right? I mean, they get in the character, and you don't talk about Volkswagens. You don't bring up like the modern world. So how do you think that influenced you? Because I think that people have compared the last 10 years as being, it's never been worse since the Civil War, but I've been to Springfield. I've seen the Lincoln Museum. I know it's pretty bad during the Civil War. It's really bad. So what do you think about the gray and the blue and the kind of civilization we had back then and the kind we have now? Have you reflected on that at all?
Kind of civilization we had back then. Are you talking socially? Are you talking technologically?
Anything that struck your mind, actually. Any takeaways you might have had about, because I know you're really sensitive about history and about, society. Did you make any kind of any dawning awarenesses of how it might inform us today?
Well, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't know. Tough question. I think that if you look at history, you see a continued march towards liberalization socially. And to me, that's a wonderful thing. I think that, civil rights, human rights are things that should be given to all, that they should be possessed by all people. Now, that doesn't mean that it's always pleasant, or that it's there's not fallout that's detrimental to some people during that march. I think it was Winston Marsalis said that many times the oppressed often take on the characteristics of the oppressor, and that's a danger. We need to be mindful of what we're doing as we're doing it, to ensure that everybody's seat at the table is secure. And that was a problem back then. People's seats at the table weren't secure. There were no seats at the table for a lot of people. Women couldn't vote. Obviously, African Americans, they had no say. Native Americans were still being killed at that time and their land stolen. So how do we go from that to an age where we profess to want equity and want everybody to have a share at the table? How do people that have never had a share at the table join that table successfully? And I think the problem right now we're seeing is that too many people just want their own table. I think identity is a construct that's kind of overtaken a lot of our dialogue. And if you look, and I'm going off in several different directions here, but if you look back at the great spiritual teachers in our world, Buddha, Jesus, you look at the Tao, that sort of thing. It's all about extinguishing these false identities. If you look at it from a spiritual, universal point of view, the identities that we've created, they're not really who we are. Our spiritual selves is our core essence. Yeah, I'm Tom. I live in Galesburg. I have blonde hair. Well, none of those things are. This is the shell that's going to go away sometime, and the essence of what's left is much different than that. And so, focusing on those identities has led to persecuting people because of their identities, and also people developing tribalism from all different spectrums to protect their identities, as well as, when people persecute, often they think they're protecting their own identity. And to me, the identity is a false one.
Yeah.
And so that's the premise that I operate from. But most of the world doesn't think that way. So,
the terms
that's just my thought on it, Mike. I don't know if that answered your question.
No,
I went way off of the Civil War there.
No, but tribalism, Balkanization, the Balkans started World War I. I mean, the idea that you have these artificial constructs of these people that cannot get along, and you can conflate it into a war that everybody kind of wanted anyways, so it's like a proxy. I think you see it a lot in history. But I worked and when I went to DePaul to get my teacher certificate, we had to find instances where you can go out and do teacher service and observation. And I went and I volunteered to help out at a shelter for children in what was the conflict with Clinton? Where was that part of the world? Bosnia. And these were Bosnian children who had, they looked like they just got out of the camps in World War II. They were emaciated. They had most of their parents were dead. These were orphans. And you remember that conflict, how horrible it was. And it was Muslim against Christian, but they were ethnically pretty much identical. It was like a Star Trek episode. I mean, these people looked exactly alike, but if you ask them, those others are Satan incarnate, right? And they must all be exterminated, including their children. They must all be exterminated. And these are people who lived together for 800 years. They've held these grudges, right? So it was really touching for me to see these kids and to see how insane, and these are Western people. These are civilized people, right? That have made scientists and musicians and everything we call Western civilization. You can see how this can spiral into just genocide so fast. That's what worries me about people, that we can turn really fast.
Yeah. I'm worried about that here, actually. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but I saw what happened on January 6th, and I think we're in a very dangerous place right now. And I think that conversations like what we're having is very important, because we have all these influences telling us that, well, Mike's more conservative than you, he must be evil, or Tom's a liberal, therefore he's demonic, that sort of thing. They're just ridiculous accusations that flow through the web, and people are choosing their sides. And it's like, no, wait, we're actually all on the same side here. We want our street to be intact, and that, to have our barbecues and not have to worry about whatever's going on, and it just scares me how worked up people can get with, like, once again, going back to not having the information that they might need to make a real decision.
I was just at the Illinois State Fair, and man, it was awesome. And there was no politics there. And you're in the seat of Illinois power, right? But Springfield's a funny state because it's a red county in a blue state. So Springfield's a funny place, right? But
I lived there for 4 years.
Yeah, so Illinois is a funny place. Illinois is a funny state in some ways, and I think the popular sport in Illinois is to bash Illinois. But you go to the fair, and you think, well, this is an awesome state. There's some beautiful things happening in the state. It's just that we just can't get our heads around certain things, like corrupt politics and things like that. But my point is that I think that the media doesn't make any money off of headlines like, hey, people in America actually like each other. That's not a headline.
Right.
Nobody wants to hear that. But I think that's more true. I think that you're seeing if you drive around America, people get along just fine with each other. I mean, interracially too. It's fine. And you remember when people didn't identify as being liberal or even conservative, like William F. Buckley was a conservative, Ayn Rand, I can name a few people. And then on the left there, people probably didn't know any communists, but like, oh yeah, so-and-so is really liberal. But most Americans, sports was kind of like, I mean, politics was kind of like sports. Like Kennedy's my guy, Nixon's my guy. They're both corrupt. Yeah, I know. Chicago stole the election for Kennedy because my dad's friend helped do that. But Nixon got it stolen in California. So but we used to know what politicians were like, right? Now we think like, well, my guy's a saint, and your guy's Satan. And it's like, well, that's kind of naive, dude, So anyway, I agree with what you're saying. And I think it's incumbent on liberals and conservatives to really watch their own camp, because I think a conservative should really be careful about what they're trying to conserve, because I think the idea of conservatism, you're trying to protect, you're trying to keep the things that are good, right? You're trying to hold on to the good things that have worked in the past, and you let the other shit go, right? And a liberal, I think, and I think of myself as a classical liberal, actually, but a progressive would say, I agree there should be progress. Absolutely. Right. But you should also look at an agenda that might, destroy the things that are good. Right. Like it's a nuanced, difficult problem. Don't think it's simple. I think that the problem with progressivism is that Rousseau gave us these simple ideas, and the French were like, yeah, it's a good idea. Let's just cut those bastards' heads off and start fresh. And that kind of idea that you can cut off the bastards' heads and start fresh went to Mao, went to the Cambodian killing fields, went to Hitler. You see it over and over again. We're like, well, we just get rid of those bastards, we can do this system right. And
it's very human, isn't it?
Yeah. It doesn't matter what the ethnicity is. It doesn't matter what the religion is. It seems to work. Yeah. It's simple.
That's right. And we just have to stand up against that. At least for me, I have to stand up against that. I'm not going to participate in any kind of extremism that leads to violence. Gandhi and Martin Luther King, great examples. I don't have their strength. I don't know that I could go through what they did or sacrifice the way that they did, but I sure admire them, and I wish we had more of them, because their love was for everybody. They had Gandhi was wanting the liberation of his people from an imperial power that was taking advantage of them, and that's what it was. But he didn't hate the British. He didn't hate them. He just wanted to see his people treated better. And he Vedanta, the ancient Hindu religion, it's very universal. And so there was no hate towards the British. It was just, please realize what you're doing here. And I think Martin Luther King was similar in many ways. And
well, they appealed to their better angels, to quote Lincoln, where they said, doesn't the British Empire represent something better than this? And I think most British people probably said, yeah, we're not that. And I think Martin Luther King said the same thing, that America's better than this, isn't it? And I think most Americans said, yeah, we're better than this shit. I think that there's an argument to be said that Paul Johnson, I think, made it, the historian, that if the Germans had been running India, they would have guzzled Gandhi, because there weren't better angels maybe to be found. So, thank God it was
at that time.
Yeah, of course, at the time. So, thank God there's better angels, and that civilization has, like Judeo-Christianity, we have these institutions in our civilizations that are kind of foundational, that are about, founded on the idea that all human beings are creatures of God, or in God's image, and worthy of rights and protection and liberty. And I think if we lose that for some other idea, we're in a lot of trouble.
Absolutely, yeah. Like one thing that struck me, you were talking about Springfield. You grew up in the Chicago area, and do you remember Ed Verdoliak, the city councilman?
Yeah, of course.
When we're off air, I want to tell you a story about him. My interaction with him one time, it was hilarious. But moving back to Springfield, coming here to Galesburg from Chicago, were you a little bit like Carl Sandburg? Why is everything Carl Sandburg? Who is Carl Sandburg? I
didn't know about the poet Carl Sandburg until I was here.
Exactly. Yeah. And the Sandburg Drive, Sandburg Mall, Sandburg this, Sandburg that. And, Sandburg was fine, but I never understood the mania for Carl Sandburg around here.
My wife's great uncle beat him up. Said he was a real jerk, a little, he didn't like him. He thought he was a real, whatever, but yeah, he beat him up.
That's a good aside. I moved to Springfield, and me being the Civil War history nut that I am, I loved Lincoln this, Lincoln that. Everything was Lincoln.
Right.
But my friends that grew up there, they were so over Lincoln. They weren't interested in Lincoln in the least, because they were so inundated with it.
They burned out
as kids.
Yeah.
And I guess Sandburg's not on the same level as Lincoln, but that's always how I kind of felt about it. I do like the statue on the circle.
It's a great. I hate to say it, but I freaking love that statue. I love it. because it's so funny because, you know, I when I left Knox College, I moved to a hut in the woods and raised goats, and I raised Nubian goats, 3 of them. And there's Sandberg, because he raised goats too. And he's a big bronze, a little bit bigger than life statue of him with a Nubian goat, which I think is so funny. And if you know anything about Nubians, they scream like you're murdering a child. It's the most horrible sound you could imagine. It's horrifying. And I had 3 Nubian goats. They were all castrated boys, but they were all gay. And so at night, they'd gang rape the smallest one, or at least try to. So that was the sound every night living in the forest in Maine, was a little baby goat being gang raped by his brothers. So I just laugh when I see, like, yeah, they don't really know how funny that is, you know, pork. You know, so anyways, that's kind of a colorful story, but yeah, it's a great statue. Carl Sandburg, I think of him in the same line as Woody Guthrie, you know, the whole folk era, the folk music era of the Depression era, is a kind of there was a kind of progressivism, and I think it's a good era we need to talk about more, because I don't think that Americans were as bifurcated back then. There was problems back then, but I think that WPA spirit, as much as you may not like FDR, my dad hated FDR, but there were some good ideas that came about if we're going to spend some government money, why don't we do it to, like, get kids digging trails in Yosemite, you know, doing things like that. Why not?
I would love to see that. I would love to see the CCC come back, or the WPA. It won't happen, but I think that would be great for our country. It'd be great for the kids, because they got to get involved in something. You know, so many people are slipping through the cracks and not getting involved in things. And, you know, how do you expand beyond where you grew up, or everything else you've learned, unless you get involved in something else to see what else is out there. We're so involved, you know, we're involved in social media these days. And I don't know. Now I just sound like an old man railing on the kids, and I really love the kids. Like I said, working at the college is great. I love being around the youth and the ideas. But yeah, sometimes I do sound like the old man about, well, if these kids would just do this.
Well, that's a part of connecting. You and I aren't always right, because we are the old men in the room, but the kids, of course, aren't always right either. But I think that working together, get those synergies going, is always better, right? You know, we should inform each other. And then I think that's the best solution, is not to put all the old people in the tower and all the kids, get them away from the old people. I think it's a disaster. I never liked that.
Speaking of, well, you know, once again, Mike, I'm going to digress just a little bit, if that's okay. I spent the summer doing what's called a CPE. It's a clinical placement for my degree, my MDiv degree, and I did it working hospice. And so I was doing that after work, or during the weeks and during the weekends. That's probably why I looked a little ghostly when you would see me outside. Just pretty, you know, it was exhaustive, but working with
people who are dying. You're saying people who are dying. Yeah.
It was phenomenal. I loved spending time with folks. And, you know, one lady I was spending time weekly with was 101. Another one was 100. And they would tell me about their lives. And we, you know, I was there in the role of chaplain. So they took advantage of that, having a chaplain at their disposal to talk about things they might not normally talk about with other people. And I learned so much from people. And I just want to say that people that are 100 years old, they still have a lot to offer, you know, even if it's just insight and wisdom and thoughts. That's valuable. And for someone like me, she looked at me as a kid. You know, I'm 53, and to her, I was just a kid at 101. But I found it to be valuable for myself, and I hope I provided value for those people to give. You know, listening is so important.
Yeah.
Some people don't have anybody to listen to them, and I don't know. It was a very valuable experience, and whoever's watching out there, I would recommend volunteering for hospice work. You know, you don't have to do it all the time. Maybe once a week, go see a hospice patient or two. And
it kind of relates to one of the harps I have. I think it's a great idea. Again, you're connecting, you're creating social connective tissue, right? By getting young people to listen to old people. I had this idea that why wouldn't we have these kids spending lifetimes on their phones, right? Go in there and ask these old people in nursing homes questions about their life and do these oral histories, and they all go on the cloud, and the humanity is improved, because now we have, and the AI could sort it all out and say Depression era stories, right? And then you have this amazing oral history of these 80, 90, 100-year-old people, talking about 1932. And then you have a collective memory of 1932, December 6th, right? I think that would just it would make our human race better. And can you imagine the scholarship that could be done from that research, right? It would be unbelievable. So and it's not hard for it. That's unskilled labor. Have a kid go to the Galesburg Nursing Home, Seminary Manor, and just interview these people. And because you like you said, they sing like a bird. They will talk.
But you look back at during the Depression, there was a program like that, where people were sent to speak to the former slaves about their experience in slavery.
Shoah too. Shoah after the Holocaust, they did Shoah.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's so much out there that can be mined, information that can be mined, that we're not doing that at the same level that we were at that time. So I think that'd be a very valuable program. And I think that we would gain as a society from having that information shared, not just kept bottled up or as a family secret or anything like that.
Right.
That's the power. That's the power of history. People ask, why is history important? Well, that's why. It shows you what people are capable of, what people can live through.
Yeah.
That's what astounds me is I think about these historical events and what it took to get through that. What it took just to be on the Oregon Trail and be a pioneer moving out west. Can I do that? I don't know. It gives me appreciation for life, I guess.
I was in Wyoming and I saw a placard. And when you drive through Wyoming, this is a big country and it's an empty country. When you go to Wyoming, it hits you over the head. It scares you to death because, no one's going to find you. It just, and I was right where Tarantino had set his movie, that Western he just did. And there was a plaque, in an old Mormon settlement, right? But I went in there and talked to these people who were running the settlement there. And they talked about how there was this group of, they all walked. So they're walking from Iowa and they started too late in the season. And so they left like in, I don't know, August or something. And by the time it was October, they're all gonna die. So these young men went over to this river, they forded the river, they picked up the women folk, right? Left the carts there. The carts were, picked up the women folk, carried them over the river, brought them to the settlement in Wyoming, and almost all these young men died. Okay. And that was the kind of life, and they just willingly did it. I mean, that was the kind of hardship we're talking about. So many lives were lost just to save these people.
The risk that people take out of desperation.
Yeah.
The Irish coming to the United States because of the famine there. There's a lot of there are people that do amazing things out of desperation, and we've benefited from that, and we don't understand that, at least on the same level that from which it was experienced.
Well, I think we.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like the idea when you become a spiritual and realize the other is more like me than not like me, right? You become more seemingly humble and more hesitant to pounce, right? And to know that you live in a historical continuum and people that were your age 100 years ago were almost exactly like you, right? I think that creates a kind of a natural good humility, where you don't have the hubris of your age and think, we're the smartest we've ever been. Ha ha ha. It's like, actually, you're kind of a dumbass like they were 100 years ago, and you're smart like they were 100 years ago. You're the same person, essentially, almost.
Yeah, you think about how, I think it was Faulkner said something about the past isn't even the past. And part of that is true. And for what you're saying, even though the dates are different, the human experience is the same in many ways. At least in our impulses and our drives and our egos are the same as we've been experiencing as a species probably since the beginning. Even time wise, I remember talking to my grandfather, and he would say when he was a kid, he'd see the old Civil War veterans down in the city park playing checkers. And that means I knew somebody who knew the Civil War veterans.
Right.
So 1862, 1863, that era seems so far away, but we're just a couple generations removed from it, really, as far as, it's that close. And you still see it in our society, that era is still alive in our society. It's been there from the beginning, and it remains there. And so
I wonder, living in America where we're addicted to the new. And I think in some ways it's good. I think that we shouldn't have those Ukrainian kind of blood rivalries that go on forever,
Right.
those race hatreds. We don't have those in America as much. I mean, when I was in Chicago, Polacks married, Dagos, and Irish married Black. It didn't matter who was marrying who. Maybe not Black and Irish, maybe now, but not then. But pretty much all the white European people were marrying each other. And that would have been probably no-go 100 years ago, right? So we're intermarrying, and we're kind of losing a lot of our cultural heritage that was kind of the really nasty stuff, like the English wanting to kill the British or the Irish and vice versa. But also what's lost, I think, in that beautiful cultural amnesia is, what's lost? What was I going to say? I lost my thought. Oh, what's lost is a sense of having your foot in history. We're so addicted to the new mall, the new neighborhood, the new house, right? Everything's about the new in America. I think we lose sense of the old, that we are connected to the past. And I think the Europeans kind of have a sense of that, where, been there, done that, this is history. The Romans were here yesterday, right? I mean, when you're in England, it's like there's Bath, and you're like, there's a bathhouse right there. The Romans were just here. They were just, you just missed them. You just missed the Romans, right? I think it's probably, like you're saying with Faulkner, it's probably more accurate. The Romans were just here. Jesus was here like a second ago. You just missed him, right? He's coming back, but he was just here. I think that's not an inaccurate thing to say.
I think you're right. As far as like the physics and the science behind time, we don't have it figured out yet. Right. I don't think that time is necessarily linear.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you ask a physicist about that, string theory is not complete science, but it's very fascinating. We don't know it all. We like to think we do, but we don't. I wanted to go back to something else you said about how it's just, groups got together or didn't get together years ago in our history. Mm-hmm. My grandmother, when I was in high school, I went to Catholic church one time with and we're Methodists, mm-hmm. but the Catholic church one time with a neighbor girl who I thought was very pretty, and because she invited me, and my grandmother got wind of this, and she had a talk with me, and she said, "You need to know, we've never had a Catholic in our family before." And I'm thinking, I'm 14. I'm not planning on starting a family, I just like this girl, went to church with her, but back then, even something as simple as that, a Protestant boy going to with a Catholic girl to a function, that was verboten, for that generation. And now nobody's going to think twice about that.
No.
So I think a lot of the things that we find upsetting, or we worry about, I'm losing my heritage, or I'm losing my culture, who I am. Cultures change.
Yeah,
they just do. And so, yeah, I guess in one way we are losing our culture, but that's just the way the world works. It's always been that way.
Yeah. And if you want to go find the old recipes, hopefully you can find them, because that's what oral history is for. Get the recipes, learn how they made their weaving patterns. That's good, but save the other shit for the grave. Like you don't need all the hate, or you don't need all the weirdness. There's a lot of weirdness in families. You know that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you know what we're going to do. Go ahead.
Well, that's a great point you made, Mike. That if you want to make the recipe can still be there for you.
Yeah.
It can still be important to you, mm-hmm. but it doesn't have to dominate everything.
Yeah. Your father-in-law was a real sweet guy. He just passed recently. Bob Helen, and I read a couple of his novels. He was a great writer, but I know that you guys have saved some of those recipes that he was so good at. He was such a good cook, right? And that's a great tradition that'll pass in your family now. Bob's cookie recipe or whatever it is. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, and that Heather's my Heather.
Mm-hmm.
We both have wives named Heather. Is very much appreciative of things like that.
Yeah.
And when you were saying cooking originally, I was taking that as a metaphor for larger cultural.
Why not? Yeah, take it. Yeah.
But you're right. Literally, cooking itself is a very important thing. And yeah, so it's something that we can pass along, and my kids love the fact that they're getting recipes from their great grandmother, and I don't know, it's just something that you can have as something unique to your family that you can appreciate, and
right.
and still appreciate. I still appreciate the little taco place by the cemetery. I eat there once a week.
By Knox over there, on Monmouth Boulevard, that one.
It's on Academy Street, right next to Hope Cemetery.
It kills. It doesn't even have a sign. There's not even a sign. The sign's wrong.
The sign's wrong.
The sign's wrong. My family sent me there. I'm in the park. I'm saying, where the hell is this place? They're like, well, your phone says you're there. I'm like, I don't see it. The sign was wrong. It's the best Mexican in town. It's great. I love that place. Yeah. Speaking of that, my dad, we sent him to Italy when we were kids because he had never gone, and he was like in his 70s or late 70s. So we bought him tickets. I said, well, either you go or throw the tickets away. There's the tickets. So he went, and he was so disappointed by the food because he thought the Italian food would be like his mother's cooking. And guess what? It had been 100 years, it had been 80 years, whenever she was there last, and the cooking changes. So
it does. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of fun. I think every Italian man thinks that his mom was the Italian cook, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, I want to make a part 2 of this because we haven't got dived into I think Galesburg and Knox College have really fascinating histories that are full of nuance and irony, extreme irony. So maybe we'll talk about that, but you promise you're going to come back again.
Yeah, it was fun. I'll be glad to do it again sometime.
Let's do it again because I didn't even talk about Asha, and I want to talk about Asha for life too. But I want you to go get your eye fixed. You have the same problem I have every year. You have poison ivy in your eye. You got to get it fixed, dude. No, you got to get it fixed.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. That's for sure.
No. So come back next time when your swelling is down, and we'll talk again. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on, Tom. It was awesome.
And I'll see you on the street too, Mike. Thanks for having me.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Right, bye-bye.